and with all of you devotees as well. I think that when Maharaj was describing this Leela about the fruit vendor and Sudama, how they both came back to their homes and they found all of a sudden they were very wealthy. They had a large house, so many jewels. And I was wondering, well, is that the culmination of the wonderful talk you've given us this morning, that we should expect that if we worship Krishna, we'll get so many jewels, we'll go back home and there's a mansion there. Well, it's actually true. Those things are considered how one becomes enriched. If you're rich, you're wealthy, you have a big house, big bank balance, fancy cars, so many things. So, do we get riches? Are we enriched by the association of devotees? Of course we are. Of course we are enriched by the association of it. It may not manifest in terms of the things that we see that the fruit vendor or Sudama Brahman received. But Sudama Brahman was actually wealthy before he went to visit his friend Krishna in Dwarka. Because he had those memories of his friendship with Krishna in his heart. That's the real wealth that he possessed. Actually, it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Krishna book actually, there, Prabhupada says that he enjoyed all these things as prasad, for the mercy of the Lord. So we also have the opportunity through our relationships with one another to become wealthy, both spiritually and materially. Spiritually, the wealth of association with the devotees is that they remind one another. Katyantas yamam nityam sushanti cha ramanti cha, Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. Simply by discussing amongst themselves, they find the greatest wealth, which is happiness in the heart. Simply by discussing about Krishna, as we've been doing the last few days, hearing about Krishna. So much satisfaction comes in the heart there that what does anything matter? What does anything matter? Any material thing you can endure it. Sometimes in the mutual service that we have as GBC members, enduring is all that you can really do. It's frustrating sometimes that something more cannot be done, or that this problem won't develop, or that problem won't develop. But what's the benefit? I can tell you now, just by my own personal experience, probably the last 3 or 4 years have been the most difficult for me in terms of service on the GBC. Some of you may know. Very, very trying circumstance. But what is the benefit of having gone through that? Is that I've developed a very close relationship with Bhakti Charu Swami. I've had the wonderful opportunity to sit in Mayapur an evening after a day of knocking our heads against so many problems. And he asked me, Sesha, you come for pizza tonight? So we forget the troubles and just take Krishna Prasad. I had the wonderful opportunity to hear about our spiritual master. You know that His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami, by Krishna's arrangement, had such intimate service to Srila Prabhupada in the last days. They were here serving him in their various ways. I was trying to get him to speak about it the other night, but I guess I wasn't direct enough in my question. But I wanted him to speak about, when he was talking about how the residents of Vrindavan did the parikrama. Maybe you remember I asked a question about parikrama. What I was hoping to get from him was his recollection of the controversy that was there in the last days when Prabhupada said, I want to go on Govardhan Parikrama. And then, because one night we were together in Mayapur, and he was just the two of us, and he was explaining the whole history from the inside perspective. Of course, we know this, but because it's a spiritual activity, although you know it from one direction, the outside, that doesn't mean you know it from the inside, or that it's a tired or hackneyed thing when you hear about it from the inside, or hear from another angle or vision or view. So I had hoped that he would take the hint and give us the opportunity to share that. But these are the kind of experiences that you go gold mining in the association of devotees. We hear these pastimes, again, like Maharaj said, is there any need to hear about Sudama Brahman? We all know, you know the story. No, let's mine it again for more detail, more emotion, more experiences that they were having there. It's so nice to hear how Sudama was thinking, oh, will they let me in? You know, I'm an immigration attorney, I could, get the point of checking the documents. I could relate to Sudama's anxiety. But again, we become enriched by this type of exchange amongst the devotees. And that's our real wealth. So spiritually we can understand, okay, spiritually that's wealth and everything, well and good. But you said materially as well. So how does this enrich us materially as well? Well, there's a story about the Jews that were in the concentration camp of the Nazis many years ago, last century. And someone did some research that how did some survive? Why did some survive and others not survive? So those that survived because they kept alive the discussion and talk and feeling that, well, we're in this together, we're suffering, some brotherhood, these kind of feelings actually materially prolonged their lives, whereas others were dying around them, unable to bear the type of confinement. So in a similar way, this material world is a terrible place. We may realize that to one degree or another, but it is. Maharaj is explaining this morning. Simply kanda, karma kanda, jnana kanda, vishera kanda. Pots of poison. This material world this body is a place to receive suffering. But if we have friendship, association with each other, then whatever material problem we have, we can overcome. We can overcome. Sometimes you'll see our communities come together to help an individual family in need. Someone needs some advice. He can get that from mentoring from older devotees. So even dealing with this our material circumstance, having a tight-knit community of devotees of the Lord that can understand our situation, understand the problem we're going through, can empathize with us, and can actually help us through our difficulties. That's that's a great wealth that we should not underestimate. I think the greatest enemies of our greatest enemies are feeling that we are somehow or another alone. That there's no one to help me, no one that understands me, no one that I can share with my troubles in life. Rupa Goswami, he recognized this value also, therefore, in Upadeshamrita, Sri Upadeshamrita, Nectar of Instruction. He gave the methods for sharing love between one another. Receiving prasad, giving prasad, giving one gift, receiving a gift, and revealing one's mind and hearing another reveal their mind confidentially. Very, very important. There are only 12 or 13 verses. Upadeshamrita. The nectar of instruction, the essence of instruction. If you had 13 things you wanted to say about the process of devotional service, those 13 things would be very, very important compared to everything else that's there in the ocean of literature that we have. And so it's so important that it was included among those 13, this idea of exchange, confidential exchange between devotees. Spiritually as well as materially, these things benefit us. So we should never underestimate that or take it cheaply. Let offensive behavior or words be exchanged between us. These things are our real enemies because they steal the wealth of the association of devotees from us. So, if I had one thing to ask of all of you today here, never criticize the Vaishnava. That is the worst possible thing you can do for yourself. It doesn't hurt necessarily that Vaishnava, but it hurts our hearts and it cuts off us from the real wealth of Krishna consciousness. So, I'd just like to humbly offer that. Hare Krishna.
Sesha Prabhu ki. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for coming. Didn't Sesha Prabhu's presence here make a big difference? It's indeed made a very big difference. I was telling Sesha Prabhu also. So, does anybody have any question to Sesha Prabhu? Yes. Give the cordless mic.
Hare Krishna, Sesha Prabhu. Very wonderful, inspirational wisdom you shared like in the last 10-15 minutes. It's like full tact, every single word of what you said really touched my heart. I had one question. You mentioned in the last 3-4 years, things have been really trying times for you and with everything that you've gone through. And I've heard that, ISKCON has been through a lot and it's come so much forward. It has come growing and is booming at this time. So I'm interested in knowing what was it that got you through those last 3-4 years, and if you were to look back and give 1 or 2 pieces of advice to me, what would that be?
I think I've already mentioned that, but it's good that you bring it up again, because it's for emphasis, I can say. It's the working relationship that we've had. Mainly these problems have been dealt with on the executive committee of the GBC, and so His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami and myself sort of traded off. I was the chairman one year, he was the chairman the next year. The year before that, we were both first chair, vice chair, and second vice chair, and after that, we're still on the committee. So the ongoing nucleus, Maharaj, myself, Prabhu from Ireland, and our godbrother Guru Granda Prabhu, we had a committee assignment that we're working on, and the relationship amongst us, and it wasn't always easy when you're dealing with difficult situations. Sometimes there's some even strain among the group itself that may be working, but if you're a group and you believe each other and you love each other, then that helps you get through. So you just have to persevere in doing that, and somehow or another.
You can tell about BSC.
BTSC.
Yeah, BTS.
BTSC, Brooklyn Temple, No Sale Committee. That's the problem that we worked on, and it's not just. And I don't think we saw it as just one temple, one situation, but rather as preserving what Srila Prabhupada has given us. And I think that's where the inspiration to continue working together as a group comes from, is that Srila Prabhupada wanted certain things. And our mission, particularly as his disciples, is to make sure that ISKCON remains what he wanted it to be. And with that as a goal, and the importance of that, and the association with others who believe that way as well, that enables you to conquer any kind of difficulty you may come across. It's Prabhupada's desire, and working toward that, keeping that as a focus of your life. That's the inspiration that I felt. I don't know if that helps you.
It does. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions for Bhakti True Swami? Oh, Bhattaraja.
Maharaj, sometimes we read, for instance, in the Krishna book. Recently, I was in one of the chapters. I'm not sure which one it was, but Prabhupada was comparing a difference of opinion between Jiva Goswami and one of the other acharyas, how they differed in their perspective of one of the pastimes. And we've seen that before, that there is sometimes a difference of opinion, but it seems that that difference is embraced and not just tolerated, but accepted. In our movement, sometimes we see that there may be differences of perspectives, and obviously we're not on the level of acharyas, so sometimes there has to be some tolerance and sometimes some intolerance with the different perspectives. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on how to reconcile differences of opinion, and how and when those should be tolerated or not.
Well, first of all, when there are some differences of opinion or presentation in different acharyas, then we have to understand that they are writing or presenting it from the spiritual perspective. Like, they are not saying things from their own mundane perspective as such. So that's why the understanding is we have to accept. The understanding is, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur pointed out, when there is a difference, then we have to understand it's kalpa bheda. In some kalpa it happened this way, in some other kalpa it happened this way. Like, from which kalpa they are seeing it. That is the only difference. The difference of kalpa, not in difference of their perception. And on the other hand, what actually happens, like when unself-realized individuals get into some kind of a conflict, and they keep, like pushing their agenda as the one and the others are wrong, so that actually causes a problem. Like, I'll give you one example. Say the jivas fall. It kind of, went on for so many years. But we didn't really go back to what Prabhupada said. We didn't listen to what Prabhupada said. We didn't listen to what our previous acharyas have said. We simply got, this camp is jiva, fell from the spiritual world, and the other camp is the jivas never fall from the spiritual. And and it created the conflict. But if we listen to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada said, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time, because you will never be able to understand, whether we came from the spiritual world or not. The reality is, we are here. So let's try to go back there. Don't waste your time, whether we fell from the spiritual sky or not. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in that respect, said that the cause of our fall from the spiritual world lies in the spiritual domain. So unless and until you go back there, you'll never be able to understand why you fell. Right? Prabhupada also gave an example that how some simple thing can become a complex, controversial issues. Like there is a, Naya has different examples. There is one called Kaktaliya Naya, Kaktaliya logic. Kak means a crow, and Tal means a tal fruit. So once a crow sat on a tal tree, and the tal tree fell. Tal fruit fell. And then two groups started to argue with each other. One group said, because the crow sat there and that's why the tal fell. The other said, no, the tal fruit was right, that's why. Now, what's the point in getting into this kind of arguments? Another such argument is that somebody got shot by an arrow. And two persons started to argue from which side the arrow actually came. One is saying it came from the north side, the other is saying, no, it came from the south side. But the person who has got hit by the arrow, he said, please get the arrow out. Don't waste your time trying to figure out from which angle it came. So our arguments often lead to this kind of thing, and it becomes very personal, and it becomes, to some extent, it becomes offensive even to Srila Prabhupada. I have seen individuals, ISKCON devotees, indirectly or in a subtle way saying Prabhupada is But we don't recognize the fact that Prabhupada said, don't waste your time. It's not going to help you by arguing from where you fell. What will really help is to recognize that we are here and we have to get out of here. So that, I would say, is the difference, because our conflicting, situation is very much in the mundane platform due to immature understanding. And you see, the Vedas are saying that spiritual reality is inconceivable. And inconceivable means it is beyond material nature, beyond material domain. And that spiritual understanding cannot be concluded by argument. Tarko apratishta shutaya vihi. The argument simply makes the Vedic conclusion divided. So that would be my take on that. Thank you so much. Any question to Sesha Prabhu? Ask Sesha Prabhu, it doesn't matter. Ask Sesha Prabhu will answer it. Kitida?
Yes, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
No, Sesha.
Hare Krishna.
Sesha Prabhu also is Guru.
Yes. Thank you so much both of you for your wonderful classes. I just have one question. That we have heard that Krishna shows special mercy on his devotees when he takes away everything, especially the material attachments, and finally give himself. But how do we understand the pastimes that you shared about the opulence being given to Sudama Brahmana and the fruit vendor, that it might act as an attachment and become an impediment, or how to take it?
Sesha Prabhu actually dealt with that point, so I'll ask request Sesha Prabhu.
Well, Srila Prabhupada says there in the Christian book that how he took it was as prasad of the Lord. So every circumstance we're in, probably a higher percentage of that circumstance has to do with our consciousness and our perception, I think Maharaj was talking about this last night, than the material circumstance itself. And so, what is the conception that Sudama Brahmana or the fruit vendor had? Not that I'm approaching Krishna for some personal gain. Maharaj explained that when the fruit vendor came, she saw Krishna coming with the grains in his hand and it was falling out, the small boy. She became captivated just by the scene. And by the time he got to her, he had nothing to barter. So if she was just interested in bartering and getting the equal value, then she wouldn't have given Krishna anything. Or maybe give him one, okay, go away. But she filled his arms with all the fruits. And she wasn't concerned, Maharaj said. She put the basket on her head. Then she discovered, oh, this is a little heavy. And then she looked, there's so many jewels there. Not that she looked, I gave you that, what are you giving me? So that's the mentality. And if we have the correct mentality in any circumstance we have, then we can live unattached. We can live unattached and not be craving material things or material reward in exchange for devotional service. Again, Maharaj had mentioned that how does a devotee do if he gets all these things? Wealth, strength, fame, knowledge. What does he do with those? Does he use them for his own personal aggrandizement or for serving Krishna? That's one of the one of Prabhupada's. Prabhupada, I think sometimes I observe Srila Prabhupada and I think that he really liked Bengalis, He's Bengali. He just like our god brother Subhag Maharaj.
Okay.
Subhag Maharaj was a student, Bengali devotee. He's a student in London. And he had unlimited access to Prabhupada. Prabhupada would call him and he'd visit him all the time and everything. And of course, he's a wonderful devotee and disciple of Prabhupada, so that love is there. But I tend to think he also liked him because he wanted to associate with Bengali, and have some home flavor. But I forgot what I was saying, all that. But I think the point is that when there's when the consciousness is correct, then the exchange becomes one of love, not one of this trading back and forth. So I think if we cultivate that, and whatever kind of benefit we have, we use it in Krishna's service, then that will be the perfection of the relationship.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Amit. This is the last question to be answered.
Shri Hare Krishna, Sesha Prabhuji and Guru Maharaj. So my question is related to the pastime of Rukmani marrying to Krishna. I'm just curious that Rukmani knew that this is, sending letter to Krishna on time is a matter of her life, and she had a lot of soldiers who can ride on horses or chariots. So I'm just wondering, why did she choose a Brahmana who could only go barefoot? Is there any internal meaning?
Yeah, generally the Brahmanas usually were the medium for communication. Generally when the message is sent is a Brahmana, and it had to be confidential. That had to be confidential because she could, she trusted the Brahmana. Had it been anyone else, say going on a horse, really instead of going to Krishna, they would have gone to the other camp and said, well, this is planning this. So generally the messages were and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Glory.
Hari Hari Bol.